Hello, I'm Patty from Cultural Chemistry and welcome back to episode 4 of Does Culture Matter in Your Zoom Room? Today I want to talk about some of the different ways that people have of communicating, whether it's of signaling interest, boredom or disagreement. And some of these signs can be really quite subtle and much harder to read online than in real life. As always, if you've experienced any of these challenges, then please share your stories. So eye contact is a great place to start in this discussion because it's often really hard to make online. Just try it next time you're on Zoom. So for people from cultures who prefer not to make eye contact, it's probably been a great thing. But for many other people who feel that eye contact is a key way that we both show and judge openness and honesty, it's much more confusing, I think is the best word. So in a group of just 4 people, for example, it's really easy for everyone to be looking at somewhere or someone else. And in big groups, it becomes impossible to make that connection with people. You just don't know where people's eyes are going. So in real life, our eyes would be constantly sort of roaming the room, checking out the surroundings, and every few minutes we'd make a connection with someone, even if it was only momentarily. And that just doesn't happen on Zoom. So I think it can feel a lot harder to feel that we've made a connection with someone. Body language is another important non-verbal communicator, and again, much harder to read when we are reduced to a head and shoulders view of someone. The usual ways in which people show an unwillingness to engage or a lack of interest are things like turning or leaning away, sitting back in their chair, drumming their fingers on the table, or perhaps looking at something else on their desk. And when that happens in a live meeting, we have a much greater awareness of it. And we can usually bring that person back into the conversation by changing our pace, asking them a question, and so on. I guess the Zoom way of showing disinterest is really to turn off the camera. Personally, I always find that really off-putting because you don't even know if the person is still there. And I suppose the real-time equivalent of that would be to turn your chair around and sit with your back to your client, which I can't imagine ever happening. So whether people are high or low context is another aspect of people's communication style that is exacerbated by meeting online, because people from high context cultures, places like Brazil, Japan, many of the African countries, rely heavily on assumed and implicit knowledge that will probably leave you guessing. They say things like, well, you know what happened last time we did this, and they all know, but you don't. They might respond to a colleague, you know how I feel about this, leaving you somewhat in the dark still. And if you were in the room, you'd find a way of asking, you might say, well, I don't, so what do you think about this? But somehow online, it seems much more difficult. And it's a problem for your high context colleagues too, because although they know each other well and they have a shared history, which you are not part of, they also rely really heavily on eye contact and body language to communicate messages to each other. Another aspect of this difficulty is that in high context cultures, relationships are built slowly and tend to be long lasting, whereas in low context cultures, it doesn't matter if we didn't know each other yesterday, we can still do business together tomorrow. So only a little small talk is required, warranted before we get down to the business, and words will be perfectly clear, so carefully chosen to make the offer really clear. And there's no need for educated guesswork. One of the issues that comes up again and again in my consulting is this confusion about saying yes but meaning no, and those kind of what many people in the West see as sort of rather duplicitous. Those kind of behaviors are really, really difficult to translate when you just encounter them online. So in our Anglo cultures, we do tend to prefer a straight answer to an ambiguous one, even if the answer is no. So in my book, one of the stories I use to illustrate the difference concerned a French CEO of a Japanese company. And although France is traditionally fairly high context, it is actually low relative to Japan. And my client really struggled with the way his Japanese team interpreted all his rhetorical questions and musings out loud as indirect orders to instigate some kind of task. So that's it from me today. Please join me again tomorrow when I'll be talking about the problems faced by non-native speakers and how these are made worse by being on online platforms. In the meantime, if you missed my previous videos, you can watch them on YouTube. Just search Patty McCarthy, or you can look obviously on my feed on LinkedIn. And of course, there are lots more tips and strategies in my book, Cultural Chemistry, Simple Strategies for Bridging Cultural Gaps, which is available from me directly or online. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.